My name is Jessica Andino. I get the honor and privilege of serving as the executive director of the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. We host monthly community meetings to give a little transparency of what's going on here in our organization, and then we bring outside guests to speak on a topic of focus. So this month, we are honored to have Grinnell College students a week before their finals week, and they've been working with us all semester long on certain projects. So, as I go forward, I also do want to acknowledge that our key sponsor of Hills Bank is really what allows us to provide these opportunities for engagement. So thank you to Hills Bank for that sponsorship. We normally host these on every fourth Friday of the month, but as you sit here today, you realize it is not a Friday. It is only a Monday. We have combined our November and December monthly community meetings to accommodate for the holidays. Um, I do like to start with talking about what we've been up to, what I've been up to, what our board and other staff has been up to. And again, it kind of goes between 2 months here, so bear with me as we cover a lot. We started the month of November actually with a corridor construction event in partnership with the Southeast Iowa Architects Division and Community Crisis Services Food Bank. We were really successful in getting over 5,000 canned good items delivered to our partner agency of Community, along with some sponsorships for their financial needs and assistance programs, security deposit, rental assistance, things that are our jam as well. So thank you to those that were able to participate. We have lots of different crews that put up some really creative designs that also went to a good cause. Over at Des Moines, we attended the Iowa Housing Partnerships Annual Forum. The Iowa Housing Partnership is very similar to the coalition, but it is across the entire state of Iowa, bringing together diverse partners to the table to advocate for affordable housing across the state. The annual forum was hosted on November 20th, in which we went over mainly our state legislative priorities for this upcoming year. If you're interested in joining IHP, I would encourage it. I actually even have a membership form right here on my desk. Feel free to reach out if you think you or your organization would like to join. Locally here, I got to hang out at First Christian Church on a Sunday. They host a alternative gift giving market. So instead of incentivizing or prioritizing plastics and things, they invite partner agencies like us. And I saw our friends at Habitat and Free Lunch Program and Free Medical Clinic to come on in and tell a little bit more about why we do what we do and encourage the congregation to give money and goods and time to these local organizations really making a difference. So thank you to Jill over there and everyone else that made that possible. Partnering, as we always do, we're partnering this year again with our gingerbread decorating contest. This will be throughout the month of December. There's a couple of Facebook posts out there and events to be able to submit your creative sweet house. We ask that people just do their own gingerbread house at their own leisure. Upload a photo and come up with a creative description of your house. I've seen some really, really creative ones out of realtor groups, the Iowa City Equity Department, and a lot of kiddos that are definitely more creative than myself. This year, we're partnering not only with ICAR, the Iowa City Area Association of Realtors, but we are also partnering with South of Six. So I'm excited to see what Maurice Davis and I can come up with for some community engagement events over in the south side of Iowa City. Speaking of that, we have been meeting in the south side of Iowa City. Myself, Maurice, Lakeisha from Dream City, Simon Andrew from the Housing Fellowship, who I see here today, and Sarah Thompson from the PDS department over at Johnson County. We've been working on some really fun stuff with incremental development. We are looking at this spring, bringing forth a couple of small, local, and rural opportunities for doing incremental development. You might want to think, what is incremental development? Well, you'll have to come to one of our meetings to find out. It's a lot of development that is grassroots based, meeting the community needs, not focusing too much on profit, but on community resiliency and what we would like to build together. So if that sounds of interest to you, we plan on going to Swisher, Oxford, Lone Tree, and Iowa City with this plan. And if you can't make our first one when we first announce it, that's okay. We plan on hosting these throughout 2026. Think of develop the developer kind of trainings. All of us have special abilities, special skills, special talents that they can bring to the table to make really cool things happen in our community. Very excited about that. Other things, since I haven't seen you all since the end of October, we passed local option sales tax. Yes, local option sales tax, our lost was funded or was voted on for funding in Iowa City, North Liberty, and Coralville. So going forward, we're very excited about how this money can be used to fill the gap for affordable housing here and meet the needs of residents. So you can see at the bottom, I always ask for a little bit of requests from people that join. Sorry, that's just who I am. If you join, I got to assign you a task. I ask that you just keep your eyes on city budgets, looking specifically for that lost language, but then also for affordable housing dollars. We want our community priorities to meet those budgets. So keep your eyes out there on whatever city you reside in. Every other week in my office, we meet with leaders from manufactured home communities throughout Johnson County through Johnson County Residents United. We also partner with the Iowa Manufactured Home Residents Network on this endeavor. Tomorrow, actually, we get to have a couple of our state leaders, Janice Weiner, uh, Eleanor Levin, Dave Jacoby, and Adam Zabner come and talk with our residents about how best to advocate for effective statewide change in this upcoming legislative session. You might have seen us also in the news. We've been getting a lot of news press about water quality issues that are happening in Western Hills and Modern Manor, Lake Ridge Estates, and a few others. So keep those residents not only in your thoughts, but also in your legislative agendas if you're part of any sort of group. We're advocating for change at the statewide level for 562B of the Iowa Code. I know, very exciting stuff. Truly exciting stuff is the student build house that's happening on Sandusky Drive right now. Those students are hard at work creating another affordable housing rental unit for the Housing Fellowship. I can't express gratitude enough to the Iowa City Community School District for bringing this program back, the Housing Fellowship for being a true partner in this endeavor, and then also GT Carr and Suples and crew for working with those students hands-on every single day. It's a really unique training program that I feel very honored to even be able to speak upon. So anytime you want to go, just check it. Drive down Sandusky Drive. If you're interested in the previous homes off of Ronald Street, they're absolutely beautiful. You might not even recognize that they're new homes due to their historic charm, but they're over there on Ronald Street. Check those out as well. Speaking of students, we've been working with students over at the University of Iowa. They're doing our final wrap up on videography when it comes to our Give Solar grant that's through Iowa Valley Habitat for Humanity. To remind you of what that program is, we were able to install 4 sets of solar panels with the help of Brant Heating and Cooling and Solar on Habitat homeowner homes. 2 were in Hills, 1 was in Coralville, and 1 was in Iowa City at zero cost to those homeowners, which I think is fantastic. We just started collecting data because they went online late this fall, but we've already heard from homeowners that they have reduced their electric bills by half. That is the best news that I could actually hear because we are reducing cost burden for our families here in Johnson County. So thank you to all those partners. Thank you to Scott Haas over at Habitat for bringing that project to us through the Iowa Habitat for Humanity. And then the last thing, which we actually is a great transition to our students, is we've been working on the Strong Towns Locomotive Tour. So we hosted 8 of the webinar series of Strong Towns' Locomotive Tour, focusing on different highlighted topics that are based in Strong Towns principles. And then we even hosted an additional meeting, our 9th meeting. Yes, I'm crazy, at a 9th to the 8th, to do a local discussion that was facilitated by City Manager Jeff Fruin and Better Together 2030's Katie Gerlach. So students actually get to talk about this next. They're going to be hopefully summarizing a little bit of those sessions so you don't all have to sit through 9 hours of us hanging out. But also, if you do want to watch those webinar series and local discussions, send me an email. I'll give you the password and a link to my Strong Towns account so you can go in and watch from those experts as well. Whew. I promised that would be a lot because, combining 2 months together, but I think we made it through, guys. I did at least. So now I'm pleased to announce that the students from Grinnell College's Applied Policy Analysis course are going to take the reins here as we transition our Zoomy Zooms. And students, whenever you are ready, you may share your slides and unmute. Yes, and
Yeah.
you get to take it away.
Great.
Hi,
Thank you.
guys. Good work. We can see your slides.
Okay. Okay. Hi. We're very excited to talk to you guys today. Um, Over the course of the semester, we've been looking at navigating housing affordability in Iowa City and how to tackle that. So for the table of contents, first we'll do a brief introduction on what we studied. Next, we'll be focusing on the current situation, city council, NGOs, and perceived causes for issues. And then we'll look at a case study from Ann Arbor, Michigan, following with institutional factors affecting Iowa City housing affordability. And finally, we'll conclude with some policy recommendations for Iowa City. So for the introduction, we worked with the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition to understand why Iowa City continues to struggle with housing affordability, even though the city has strong pro-housing rhetoric, and multiple adopted plans. The affordability crisis in Iowa City is not unique, but it is unique because the political will on the surface level exists. The challenge is understanding what's happening beneath that surface. An important distinction is between affordable housing versus housing affordability. Strong Towns defines affordable housing as a narrow project-specific approach that is top-down and subsidized, focused on creating a handful of units that are reserved for people making up a certain percentage of median household income. And housing affordability is what they call a broader, meaningful project that addresses the systemic and financial problem of house prices being disconnected from local reality. Our project focused on two main research questions, which were what is causing the lack of progress in Iowa City's overall housing affordability, and why does progress remain slow even though the city regularly approves affordable housing incentives, funds nonprofits, and promotes housing in official plans. And following that, what reforms are both feasible and effective in Iowa City? So could this work not in theory, but like what in this or in this city, in this set of constraints, what's implementable? Um, we first approached these questions with a mixed method strategy. We reviewed Iowa City planning documents, zoning code, affordable housing action plan, and the city's strategic plan, which helped us understand official policy tools that the city uses. And next, we compiled 12 years of city council votes related to housing from 2013 to 2025 to understand how political behavior influences affordability. We wanted to see if rhetoric predicts action, so we ran logistical regressions using counselors' vocalness score and the impact of each ordinance. This quantitative approach helped us evaluate whether the council's stated support actually translated into legislation. We then had interviews with local Iowa City councilors, which gave us insight into the internal dynamics of the city council and how they understand affordability, what they agree and disagree on, and what they see as the main obstacles to reform. Identifying barriers requires comparison, so we studied Ann Arbor, Michigan, a city that faces similar pressures, being in a major university town with limited land availability in the Midwest, with high demand. But they have made decisive structural reforms. So this comparison helped us isolate what's unique to Iowa City and what's a universal experience for a university town in the Midwest. Um, And finally, we looked at the Strong Towns Locomotive series hosted by JCAHC and had these discussions with stakeholders such as city staff, advocates, and nonprofit leaders, which grounded our analysis in everyday practical barriers for permitting delays to public resistance.
All right. Well, I gotta reshuffle. Okay. So we started this analysis kind of thinking about the role of individual level actors, mostly because we wanted to see what was going on in city council because there is such a strong pro-affordable housing rhetoric to like create this disconnect with the actual reality of people are finding their cost of housing to be unaffordable. We started with city council, try to see if there was some sort of almost double speak to see if legislative action was not occurring. But from our investigation of city council, we kind of found three main points. One, city council works primarily as a funder for more grassroots NGOs and advocacy groups to promote affordable housing projects on the ground. That seems to be most of their role in promoting affordability. Although there are specific things that they have done, such as the Affordable Housing Action Plan and really promoting the riverfront crossings district and affordability in that section. Second, we ran some data analysis to see what is the likelihood that an individual counselor will vote yes, to try and see what is causing them to vote no. And while those logistic regressions were interesting and the data analysis was interesting, the most concrete finding we actually found was over the past 12 years, city councilors vote yes 95% of the time, which means that it's not necessarily that there is no legislative support when it comes to not quite the ballot box, but when it comes to voting. And that kind of has a couple implications for where we went with our project. First, it means that the city council has been very effective in countering when encountering anti-housing expansion attitudes or NIMBYism. Kind of some of the worst effects of NIMBYism when it comes to promoting building housing is that it influences city councilors to vote no on projects they may have otherwise voted yes on because of the rhetorics of a few individuals. And the 95% vote yes means that that is likely not happening, even though there still were reports that legislation, ordinances specifically, talking about rezoning and upzoning still face significant legislative delay. Second, it tells us that the barrier likely coming from non-increases in affordability or kind of like the crisis of cost of living, my apologies, is coming from before counselors are voting on rezoning, which kind of has implications. So we kind of shifted our research to more institutions. But before we leave individual actors, we also kind of wanted to highlight the role that a lot of NGOs have had in this ecosystem, if you look at the map on the screen that we've made, in promoting affordable housing on a grassroots level. But we did have one big question from when we talked to city councilors and also investigated kind of some of the mission statements of these affordable housing NGOs, pro-housing NGOs. What is the goal for affordability and how should it be addressed? Talking to different counselors, there kind of was a different answer to the question from every single counselor on if the primary focus should be housing first initiatives, if it should be incentivizing developers to build more in Iowa City, if it should be public housing, or things like that, which may be a contributing factor to the lack of action, one might say, or from city council is that does not appear to be one clear goal on what city council can do to promote affordability.
So next up is the comparative case study that we looked at with Ann Arbor, Michigan, comparing it to Iowa City. So if you look at the cost burden winter share, and we looked at this because we wanted to look at a city that's very similar to Iowa City in that they were facing some similar pressures and challenges when it comes to housing affordability. And being in a similar setting, whether that be location-wise, having a new university, so those things might impact housing affordability as well. So we looked at the cost burden winter share from the 2024 US Census, and Iowa City had quite a high rate of 58.9% of the renters being cost burden, which is defined as spending 30% or more of their income on rent. And we looked at when we look at Iowa City, there's the University of Iowa, so it is a liberal city in a swing state where the politics of the state government is changing from election cycle to cycle. And there's a high student renter population as well from the University of Iowa. And there's also a characteristic that the city is generally car-centered, so having a lot of people commute by driving as opposed to walking. And we looked at the city council documents, and we also interviewed the city councilors in terms of what the key accomplishments have been from Iowa City regarding housing affordability, and those are listed over here. So they include a lot of the grassroots action, as we mentioned previously. So the housing first projects, so building housing that is affordable in collaboration with Shelter House, with funding coming from the city government. And the city, securing the HUD Pro Housing Grant, a federal grant, was a very significant accomplishment that allowed the city to act as a developer for the first time. So that enabled the city to have a really significant funding to move towards this really significant change. And another accomplishment that was cited frequently was the riverfront crossings and inclusionary zoning requirements, in which developments require certain portions of the development to be affordable housing. So this led us to ask a question of what are the similar cities, so cities that share some of the similar characteristics that Iowa City has. So what are those similar cities doing in order to address housing unaffordability? And this is a really important question because this will help us understand if similar cities are doing progressing housing availability significantly, then that helps us gear towards what are some things that Iowa City can either take inspiration from or implement. It's our understanding that the city is currently going through the process to develop the comprehensive land use plan for 2050. So we thought that this was a very timely topic. So with that, we chose Ann Arbor, Michigan. So similar to Iowa City, it faces significant housing affordability challenges. So having a little less than Iowa City, but still quite a high number of renters that are cost burden at 53.4%. And it also is home to the University of Michigan, which is experiencing a high renter demand, which poses significant renter demand to the city due to the rising student population. And some of the significant accomplishments that Ann Arbor has been able to do and in the past includes the ADU legislation, passing that legislation to allow all the ADUs in the city, accessible dwelling units in the city. And it also passed, this is significant, it also passed the affordable housing mileage in 2020. So this is an income tax that they're producing $1 million revenue per year, specifically dedicated towards housing. So this is something that we recognize the Iowa City isn't able to do, since cities in Iowa don't have the capacity to impose income tax. So we recognize different political contexts in which these two cities operate in, and we also found that they have a citywide parking minimums removal in 2022, which relates to some of our recommendations later on. So with that understanding in mind, we looked at, in order to look at a comparison, we compared Iowa City's Affordable Housing Action Plan from 2022. And to have a more recent understanding of, for Iowa City, we also looked at the fiscal year 23 to 28 strategic plan, which also covers some targets for housing. And we compared that with Iowa City's draft 2050 comprehensive land use plan, which they are currently drafting as we speak. So the goal of this case study was to find key actionable takeaways and inspirations for Iowa City as the city's drafting its comprehensive plan. So here are the main to share with you some main takeaways that we had from case studies. So we found that Ann Arbor was able to go through structural land use reform, and what I mean by that is that their comprehensive plan integrates land use, transportation, and sustainability to a unified, really big goal centered on the A2 for all. Ann Arbor for All framework. So you can see this diagram over here in which they think about housing being affordable, but also equitable across different neighborhoods in the city, having the city that's sustainable. So that means walkable and using the resources in sustainable manner, and dynamic, making sure that there's infrastructure and services to across all the cities. So from this, we concluded that Ann Arbor commits to a complete citywide zoning overhaul, which we'll talk about in a minute, to dismantle some of the current challenges, including exclusionary zoning and the legacy of that that it currently has in the city. So this allows them to increase housing supply, as well as thinking about things like walkability, sustainability, and everything that is that will be important in addition to supply and affordability of the housing. And another takeaway is that Ann Arbor is proposing and progressing an integrated planning approach. So this is an example of the implementation matrix, which is a really an effective way of detailing responsibility, who is responsible for what. So you can see that this is part of the housing and neighborhood goals. So this is the goal to increase the supply and diversity of the housing, and they list different action items that they were going to do. So for instance, this might include aligning parks and recreation facilities with land use patterns, which is ongoing, and then they go to plan some long-term goals, such as removing or reducing lot sizes, which they hope to do in the next year to 3 years, and a more long-term goal for the next 4 to 9 years in terms of considering commercial uses in residential districts. So this provides them with a very comprehensive plan and list who is responsible, and also be able to track the metrics for evaluating their outcomes. So with that, we conclude from this case study that Ann Arbor can provide direct inspiration for Iowa City's 2050 vision. However, we do recognize that significant institutional and political differences that we'll discuss later that can create unique challenges for Iowa City, which could mean that Ann Arbor's approach might not directly always translate to Iowa City's context. However, we note that Ann Arbor's holistic approach to housing affordability, so that is thinking not just about the cost of housing, supply of housing, but things like, is this neighborhood safe? And is this neighborhood in this neighborhood, do you have access to amenities and all of that? So thinking holistically of what affordability and what a productive community means. And so this could be a model or inspiration for Iowa City as it drafts its comprehensive plan. And in order to be successful, front-loaded reforms. So that means having short and long-term vision, and the actual action matrix that details the different actions to be taken for the goals to be to be addressed. So that demonstrates that decisive and system-wide changes that we saw in Ann Arbor can help Iowa City translate its very high political will into long-term accountability that is enforceable and measurable outcomes in cities that are like Iowa City.
You okay?
Switch seats.
Okay. So as we were transitioning from this pinpointed look at the current context of the Iowa City Council, NGOs, and the local perceived issues, to the comparison with the similar Midwestern University city of Ann Arbor, we recognized a comparable response in local support for housing affordability reform. In both the Iowa City and Ann Arbor local governance, there is strong vocal and actionable support for increasing housing affordability. However, we did see many differences when it came to the higher institutional context of these two cities. From this, we proceeded with investigating some of these larger institutional factors and the influence that they had in Iowa City. From our investigation, we found multiple instances of large institutional factors affecting the progress of housing affordability in Iowa City. The first of which we note were the incredibly complex zoning codes and regulations adopted by the city. Zoning code complexity presents issues with highly fragmented residential zoning, which then in turn restricts or prohibits multifamily housing and duplexes, and promotes plans that overlook the possibility of denser development. This complexity also leads to other major challenges, such as the restrictive land use regulations of Iowa City that are really dominated by single family dwellings and large minimum lot sizes and a strict per unit land requirement, which ultimately end up limiting the supply of housing and raising prices. In turn, this then is further exacerbated by developer response to risk associated with these complexities, as the lengthy and unpredictable approval process kind of discourages development of affordable and small scale communities. In addition to this, we looked at in addition to this, like, look at the institutional factors present within the city itself, we wanted to look at the larger context of the political and administrative limits. One of the things that really sets apart cities like Iowa City and Ann Arbor, are these like state regulations. So one of the main things that we see here is these concepts of state level preemption and limited home rule. The political context of the state of Iowa works as a constraint against local authority and looms as a threat to overriding local affordability reforms, as seen with Johnson County's attempt to raise minimum wages, which was then blocked by the state. And then on top of this, powering over the city by the state government, comes the issues with like fiscal constraints. So as Iowa City lags in sort of local revenue tools to support long-term affordable strategies, there's a lot of reliance on the limited federal funding. And then changes to those federal regulations present as an additional like layered hindrance to being able to make progressive steps in housing affordability. This current need for federal funds comes with this fear of legal challenges that end up encouraging the incremental progress that we're seeing rather than the holistic structural reform that Ann Arbor did. However, we could see progress in this aspect with, like Jessica said, the recent passing of the local option sales tax. Finally, one of the other factors that we noted as not a predominant cause in Iowa City, but still had some influencing power over the current situation, is community opposition. Despite Iowa City being a progressive area, there's still this ever-present issue of like NIMBYism attitudes from people in the community. And this public resistance to like some forms of housing affordability reform has increased political costs in areas where housing can be produced, um, as they are reluctant to kind of allow that production of like affordable housing units. So this ends up causing like the need for rezoning other areas that we've been seeing in like the ordinances and stuff like that as an attempt to weave around this kind of block of NIMBYism from community members. Um, and then of course, with NIMBYistic attitudes comes the fear of public backlash from constituents who are not in support of some housing reforms. Um, and it kind of reinforces the incentive for policymakers and the local leaders to take more cautious policy making decisions rather than something that they think would be viewed as maybe too hasty or too much for the current community. Um, Overall, Iowa City's challenges in housing affordability continues to present as an issue because of these institutional factors, the institutional design, state preemptions, and like current fiscal constraints, um, all of which are are pressing on the city, and really stopping their ability to enact large scale and long-term reform, despite the strong presence of political will and public advocacy from, the community at large. So what comes next?
So Renee just talked about, right, how there's these really big structural problems that are causing uh, issues with affordability in Iowa City, right? And those things are very hard to tackle. But there are still things that Iowa City can do in today or in the coming months or in the coming year to tackle housing affordability today. So the first one, this one is really, we've gathered these ideas really a lot from the Strong Town series that Jessica mentioned, right? And also these local discussions. So there was a Strong Town series, and then they would talk about it and really get into the nitty-gritty of what is the context here in Iowa City today. So the first one is removing parking minimums. So the way parking minimums work, right, is they're so when a developer is building a new building, they have to set aside a certain number of parking spaces for each unit that they build. Um, now, removing these parking minimums gives developers more flexibility, right? You already know as a developer that you need to sell a certain amount of units, and that some units will only sell if you have a parking space, and so you'll build a parking space anyway. But if you're forced to build a parking space, then maybe you could have put 2 extra units that didn't need a parking space and would have been more affordable. But now that you'll have to put a parking space there, you won't build them instead. So removing parking minimums is going to lower that opportunity cost, and it's also going to lower the direct cost because actually the cost of building parking is very expensive. That leads to affordability. It also leads to more density and walkability, right? You can put more units now because you don't need to reserve that space for the extra parking spots. Locally, the city already recognizes that parking is very expensive for developers. So if developers are building specifically affordable housing, then the city already provides relief to them on parking minimums, and they don't need to build parking minimums for specifically affordable housing. The city also offers alternatives in which developers can trade some of their parking spaces for instead bike spaces, for example. There's also currently a parking study that's going on in Iowa City, and what that is doing is it's trying to look at projecting the demand for parking and what that's going to look like into the future. In terms of concerns that were expressed at the webinar and also at the later discussion, there are a few key ones. One of them was that developers would take advantage of the no parking minimums to kind of use city parking as their parking lots. I think that we sort of have to think that if you charge enough, right, and you charge for city parking and things like this, then that'll be fine. It could slightly increase, right, the demand for city parking, but that's something that the city can build and charge and earn money back on. There's also a worry that removing parking will actually cause streets to become less safe because the drivers will drive really quickly through them. That's obviously a concern. Streets can always be redesigned, though. For example, where I'm from, they put a little median in the middle of a street that people used to speed down so that everyone will go like much slower so they won't hit any children or anything. That would be terrible. And then the other main concern is with the state preempting, right? We've talked about the state has preempted the minimum wage. The state also preempted a recent reform that the city did on accessory dwelling units, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But there's concerns that the state could preempt this. Now, there is good news on this one, which is that Story County, which is, as many of you I'm sure know, the county where Iowa State is, actually has no parking minimums. They've removed their parking minimums, and the state has allowed them to do that. So there is a reason to be hopeful that this is something that could happen. So then the question is, how would we actually go about implementing it? The parking study is a good way to do it, right? The parking study has raised the salience of parking as an issue and has gotten people talking about parking. We can sort of leapfrog off of that and go for no parking minimums. There's also been a lot of talk of rewriting the zoning code, right? We identified one of the big issues is the zoning code's complexity. That's one of the structural barriers that we identified. Rewriting that, you can include this no parking minimums as part of that larger rewrite. Our second one is pre-approved housing plans. Pre-approved housing plans are essentially where the city will say that if you build within certain guidelines, then you have by right development, and so it's much easier to get approval. It shortens wait times drastically. Sometimes, there's one place that shortened it, I think, from 4 years to 1 year, and there's one place from 1 year to a few weeks. You can shorten it very quickly, and this allows developers to build more quickly. It also reduces the uncertainty, right? There's costs related to uncertainty. If you're worried that you might not get approved, that's going to actually cause you to have costs because sometimes you aren't going to get approved, and you still have to spend that money to buy the land and to plan everything out as a developer. So that helps build affordability. Locally, in the discussion, there was talk that residents of the north side may actually already want this to be the case and may actually be in favor of this pre-approved housing plans. And the concerns around it are really, number one, the zoning code complexity that we previously discussed. Because pre-approved housing plans, right, they fit with the character of the neighborhood. And so if you have all of these different neighborhoods and all of these different zones, then what exactly is the character of the neighborhood can vary so drastically within a small area. So simplifying that will help this as well. Another one is NIMBY attitudes because pre-approved housing kind of removes the ability of neighbors to actually express their disapproval of nearby developments, which means that actually passing this could be more difficult because of the way that it's sort of weakening the power of this local review. And then the last one is state preemption. And in this one, there's really a significant case to be made that the state could actually preempt this because a lot of the things that pre-approved housing plans deals with are accessory dwelling units. And these are the things that the state has already preempted Iowa City on. And so there is a lot of concern. It will have to be done very carefully to ensure that it conforms with the state law already and that it's done in a way that is, I don't want to say hidden, but a little bit more hidden from the state law legislators. That would be okay. We think the best way to do this is the Iowa City is writing a comprehensive plan. They're undergoing the process now of drafting that's going to be looking into 2050 and including this as part of the comprehensive plan or possibly as part of the zoning rewrite as well. It'll help throw it in with other things, which will help kind of disguise it. And it'll also help, right? The comprehensive plan requires a lot of community input. It'll help get that community input around the pre-approved housing plans. Finally, cultural change. What do we really mean by this? It's very important, right? We've talked about these big barriers, and I've just given you some simple solutions that'll help, policy solutions that'll help soon. But we also need to address these big barriers, and that requires a lot of what actually Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition is doing right now, right? Policy advocacy, coalition building with cultural change makers. And these cultural change makers are advocates, but they're also members of city government. They're also city staff, the city manager, right? All of these people who have the ability to shape the culture of around housing that we live in. It's also conversations with neighbors, things like this. Housing advocacy has been shown to have a policy impact. And oftentimes actually the culture is much more significant in predicting the outcome and how affordable things end up being than the actual policy baseline, because the policies all operate within a culture. So where do we begin with this? We think that the comprehensive plan is the perfect sort of way to get about this, right? We can build a large coalition to really push for these affordability proposals during the comprehensive plan, and then we can ensure that this coalition stays around and that we're continuing to combat a lot of these attitudes and a lot of these cultural factors that are hurting our affordability here in Iowa City. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate the opportunity to work on this project, and we really appreciate your time and engagement. And we just want to say thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time.
I see Ellen's given some claps, but I think everybody should give some claps to these students because these students are amazing.
One moment. Trying to figure out how to mute.
I got you. Please, I have the power. Well, this is the perfect time now for anybody that is on this call. We have a few minutes here, and we have these students that have dedicated a lot of time, effort, and expertise to the cause. So feel free to unmute if you wish to ask a question. I see Ellen has already unmuted, so we'll start with Ellen McCabe.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I am interested in knowing how much further this information can be dispersed. I look at the lists of participants. I don't see elected officials other than Charlie necessarily on the call. How do we get this? To me, the quality of this information mirrors the city had a Harvard fellow. So how do we get this information in front of people?
Yeah, what a great, thank you for such that great question. And actually, we interviewed city council members while conducting our research for this project, and every single city council member we interviewed requested to see this report following, which, is very exciting in terms of like dispersing kind of what we found. And also, I think is another kind of like concrete example of that there is a lot of political will in Iowa City to increase affordability, which is it's a really positive sign for like future changes, especially kind of talking with city council members to know that city council members are searching out information is very exciting. And we've submitted our final report to Jessica to do with as she sees fit.
All over here, Ellen. No, these students are great and their efforts should be dispersed widely. And we do recognize that this is over a lunch hour on a Monday. This is recorded, so it will be strategically sent directly to each of the city council members, to their individual emails and the overarching council emails. This will also be sent to a lot of the city staff and planning, not only the Zoom link, but that report that the students just discussed. If they wished to also invite these students, if they're around to a city council meeting, or specifically to talk to Chris from Confluence, who is their lead contractor when it comes to the comprehensive plan, I'm sure these students would love any opportunity to do so. But you're absolutely right, Ellen. This information needs to get out there. And thank you for alluding to the Harvard fellow that we had during the summers. These students are top tier at Grinnell, and we feel so honored and thankful to be able to have them here, to be at the exact same caliber that you just said, Ellen. So thank you. Other questions from anyone else in the audience? Students, you blew them away. Charlie, I see you've unmuted. Thank you, Charlie. Hop on in.
Thank you very much. This is, I keep saying for each of the reports we hear from the coalition are excellent and above board. And this is by far and away the best one that that has been undertaken since I've known about the coalition anyway, or in the last many years. Particularly the notions about how to start to developing a pre-approved zoning plans or development plans for the city. And then there are many other excellent suggestions too. So I certainly agree with the notion of distributing this as widely as possible. I don't know if you maybe arranged to have workshops or something with council members and perhaps supervisors too, since some of these things can be extended to non-incorporated areas as well. So I really appreciate the work the student group has done, and I hope you get a good grades because of your efforts. And thanks very much to Jessica for your work in promoting this as well.
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, and I do want to also acknowledge not only that there are professors on here and they should get a good grade, as you said, but too, we did have a lot of city staff and elected officials or formerly elected officials at our work sessions as we worked through Strongtown's locomotive tour. I want to give a shout out to Kirk Lyman and Ann Russett, both from the City of Iowa City staff that could directly implement some of these things like the pre-approved housing plans or facilitate, discussions going forward with the other recommendations. So we have been working directly with them. They have the logins for all of the webinars as well. So I see a lot of good things that could potentially come out of this project. So thank you for acknowledging, Charlie, the high quality yet again of these students in their report. Besides saying that, the students should get a good grade again, I am going to start to share my closing slides here. I also see that Ellen McCabe had put in an announcement in the chat here. So make sure you open up your chat to see that the Housing Trust Fund is going to have another funding round that's available right now with a very large amount to create and preserve housing that is affordable throughout all of Johnson County. As Charlie said, we have unincorporated and smaller towns besides just Iowa City here. So one last round of claps for the students. Thank you, thank you, thank you, students. Honestly, you guys are, dare I say, kick butt. I think I got a PG, kick butt. And we are very much looking forward to working with you guys either in the spring if you happen to have any coursework that you need from the coalition or some of our partners that are here today or that you've interacted with in the meantime. I mean, I've gone and worked with this set of students, not these ones specifically, but this course and Andreas and team. We have one that works with our city housing authority now. So if you need a job, feel free to come on over here to Iowa City because we like good folks like you to be here. I also have to, take a moment of acknowledgement for our sponsors today, not only Hills Bank being our key sponsor for the coalition and all of our activities, but it takes many hands to be able to coordinate and have time and effort for students' reports and other things that we do here at the coalition. So many sponsors on here. I also like to always thank the Housing Fellowship for my free office space. You don't get a spot in the slide, but you get a spot in my heart. So thank you, THF, for the free office space for the coalition as well. Our upcoming monthly community meeting will go back to our regular fourth Friday of every month. I know I made everybody all kerfluffled with that, but fourth Friday at noon, same Zoom link. Students, you are more than welcome to attend us throughout the entire year as well. We don't kick you out just because the semester's out, though I understand if you can't join us, but fourth Friday every month, same Zoom link. Please be sure to join us. And if you can't join us on that, we do encourage membership. We are a paying dues membership program where those that wish to, provide housing that is affordable in our community can contribute as little as $5 a month. It was cheaper than my coffee this morning to become a member of the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. So please join us, join me, join these fine folks, join students in creating hopefully a better future for every municipality in Johnson County. And with that, you get 2 minutes of reserved extra time. Students, good luck at your finals week next week. I'm sure you will do great and you're going to do wonderful things post this course as well. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Be safe, be well. Have a good rest of your week.